Hello and welcome to the International Men's Day roundtable talk from Northumbria Healthcare NHS Trust. We are here today to have a conversation as men from across the trust in different roles. International Men's Day might get a bit of a bad rep because a lot of stuff is, I guess, still maybe slanted towards men, but there is still stuff that we need to kind of talk about and just start a conversation really, because men perhaps don't talk enough about the pressures that they face. So yes, we're here today to kind of just have an open and honest conversation. I guess I will start. My name is Liam. I'm going to chair the table today, and we'll go around and introduce ourselves. I'll start with you, Callum.
So I'm Callum. I work in patient safety and improvement.
Perfect.
I'm Aaron. I work at NSEC. I am a domestic and I've been there for nearly 8 years.
Perfect. Very long time.
My name is Satish. I work in the new PPE factory as a operations services manager.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I'm Patrick, and I'm the equality lead for the trust. For a long time I was a general manager in community health services, but I've always had an interest in equality diversity as well.
Hi, I'm Alistair. I'm one of the medical directors here at the trust, clinically I'm a GP.
Hello there, I'm Gordon Crosby. I'm a maintenance in NSEC. Been there 8 years.
Perfect. Good range of time with the trust as well. I guess with the main reason of the talk today being around, again, centred around men's health and all the different pressures that we maybe face, it might be a good idea to start off by asking, how are we all? Are we all right? Like, honestly, are we all okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Positive mental attitude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just got to try and get through the day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm a long-term COVID. I was off work 17 months through an illness.
Got you.
So I'm still under consultants regarding the condition.
Right.
And it's been quite tough.
Can you imagine?
So each day is a challenge.
I bet it is.
You know, so
You're doing
it is quite a big challenge.
Yeah, I don't think people maybe perhaps think about that. They think of the immediacy and then they don't think of the
Yeah.
long-term effects it can have. I mean, I guess with that then that's the perfect maybe place to start around the topic of mental health and men's mental health in particular, because you know the stats are all there that say men don't talk enough, and the leading case in death among men of, I think it was under sort of 55 I believe, is suicide. It's not a great statistic, I guess, and again this is why we're doing this table. So I mean, again, not to assume anything, but has everyone had different dealings with mental health? You know, it's one of those where it's the positive and the negative.
Yeah.
Have you all had various sort of dealings?
I think I'm very good at getting myself too busy and too stressed and not taking downtime.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most valuable things that someone's told me is make sure you take time for yourself. So I always make sure at some point in the week I do something that's not work related, not related to chores or busyness at home, and just go and do something you enjoy. So I think that it's not always easy to talk to someone, but finding something you enjoy and going and doing it's easy if you can. It's always good to talk to someone, but if you struggle with that, that's a bit of advice I would give to someone.
Yeah, I totally agree. Actually, what I started was in 2018. Actually, I started running, and that is my stress reliever. I never thought actually I'll be able to run. So I parked the car in Whitley Bay car park, and actually I just ran to the lighthouse. On the way back, actually I started walking. So that's how I started. And in 2018, I applied for the Great North Run actually, and I got through the ballot, which motivated me as well. And 2019 I did. 2020 was COVID. 2021 I supported one of my friend actually who wanted to run, and 2022 was the best one because I had the number through the ballot, and suddenly my father-in-law died.
Oh.
Right.
So in August, so my family went for a holiday. I was here, and when my wife went to her house, actually she saw that it's COVID. He had ILD. He was admitted in the hospital. He never came back.
Right.
So what I did was actually, my boss, Sarah Rose said, and Ashley Robinson, who's a runner as well, who works with me, he said, you got the number now, you're going to India, why don't you run actually on the same day in India?
Yeah.
So on the same day, but it was midnight here. I started at 6 o'clock. It was midnight in UK. So I put that in Strava and tagged all the people who were going to run actually on that day. So
That's great.
it's a good stress reliever. I actually dedicated that run to my father-in-law, which was really good.
No, quite a special thing as well.
It's a special thing actually. I wanted to tag that to Great North Run and thought actually it will be cringe.
No, again, it is one of those things, I guess, like in terms of we all have different stress relievers, and it's just got to, you've got to find that.
Yes.
Again, for International Men's Day, someone else from the trust has written a blog, and he's talked about how he cycles.
Yeah.
That's his, commute to and from work. That's his setup for the day and decompress thing. And I guess that is important, again, finding that.
It is actually, because it helps you physically cycling, as well as it's a good fresh air, and it's nice.
Yeah, it's the same with
It's a
running, I guess.
satisfaction. Actually, it's a satisfaction at the end of the day. And this morning, actually, I was looking for the car park in space. Actually, North Tyneside. I've seen that on the Facebook, because in Seaton Delaval, it's easier to park. When I came this morning, so at the end, actually, I parked in visitor car park, and actually, I thought I'll just pay for it, because this is important rather than going around in circles. So, yeah.
No, absolutely. The weather hasn't helped a little bit.
It doesn't help. Actually, yeah.
Yeah.
No,
I was just thinking it's really important that, because a lot of us are working more from home now as well, and you need to build that time in. I used to do that thing. It's like my commute to and from work was always like thinking time, and then I'd go out for a run straight after work, because that was something that kind of helped me process things without really thinking about it. So you didn't think about it, but by the end of it, you felt a bit better about yourself, and you kind of got a bit of perspective. When you're working from home, and I know when I've talked to lots of men who work from home at the minute, the temptation is you sit at your computer and you just sit at your computer until you're finished, and then there's no kind of start or finish. So you work, like what might have been your mental well-being space has become your workplace now. And that's quite difficult for people to kind of build in that kind of self-care, isn't it? And
the lines blur, absolutely.
it starts to blur, doesn't it? So it's about getting up. And what I do is I get a cup of coffee, I stand in my garden, unless it's pouring down like today, and just kind of like stop and just look and set myself for the day, and do the same at the end of the day.
I think as well, people don't realise how much work can give you pressure and can affect you in different ways as well. Not just with the illness, but even before this. You can be really under a lot of pressure to do a lot of different things. Men don't even talk about that.
No.
They hide it.
Yeah.
I think the other thing, I run as well, but there's a physical bit to it, but I think there's a big mental bit. And I think if, be it I actually think it's a bit like meditation, probably just my mind goes blank when I'm running, but there's a bit where we kind of, I think as men, you all talk about the physical side of it, because that's probably what we're all used to doing. But actually, I think it's a bit your happy space or whatever you want to do. It's that, probably that forced bit of, actually, this is time out. And actually, I do think there's quite a lot of meditative bits to the running or whatever you do. It doesn't have to necessarily be running to do that, or cycling. It can be anything. But I think it's about getting that mental as well as the physical. That we often just think about it as physical, but actually I find it is a big mental thing, actually.
They're working from home, actually. Sometimes it's harder, actually, because I've got a friend who works for IT department. His office is in London, right? So he works from home, but he's got 2 kids, and one is 2 years old and the other one is 5 years old. So the thing is, he hasn't got that motivation to get up in the morning, because at least we get up, get ready, go. Probably he might be wearing the same T-shirt every day morning. Nobody's going to see him unless if it's on the Teams, actually. So it's he keeps saying, actually, it's better for you because you've got a routine. You get up 8 o'clock, you travel. I know it's traffic, but at least you travel, come back. But for him, every day they're seeing wife and kids all the time. They don't see other people. So it's, what do you call it, as the other side of the land is green, or other side of the
Grass is green.
grass is green on the other side. So he keeps saying, oh, you're blessed actually going to work, where I am not. Traveling to London is expensive, and so I see is actually, it's good, he's sitting in the house, he can get up, but actually at 8:30 suddenly go into the log on. But for me, I haven't got that, but it's too different, isn't it? We need that balance.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's about that balance, I guess.
Exactly,
isn't
yeah.
You only need to dress from the top up.
Correct, that's it.
Stand up on.
I mean, we touched on something there in terms of men think it is just to talk about the physical thing of, the cool thing of doing the activity and stuff like that, and they don't talk about the mental side of things. And I guess that leads on in terms of the conversation around masculinity and, that all that brings. Why do you think there is such the pressure on men to be, the top alpha male, and anything less than that is, I guess, seen as, again, lesser than?
I think it's a tradition thing. Like, traditionally, men were the breadwinners and that kind of thing, and I think that's carried on, and we still probably have some of that the generations are changing, but we still have some of that generation where men were meant to be. That was the kind of societal pressure on men. So I think it stems from that.
There's a big thing, I think, in the north, because I was brought up in the northeastern working class community where, you know, men went out and they got drunk, and that's how they dealt with kind of any issues. They went to work, they went to the club, they came home. My dad was always kind of, I don't think I'd ever seen my dad sober till he was really ill. Actually, that was the first time I'd seen him sober, and he hadn't had a drink. But you were raised to not talk about your feelings, but just to do something. Either you got drunk or you had a fight about things. I remember somebody hit me when I was a kid, much bigger than I was. Bloody hurt me as well. But when I went in and said, somebody's hit me, the first thing my mum did say, get back out there and hit him back harder. And that was it. So that was the end of it. You know, there was no conversation about, well, how are you feeling about that? So, you know, she didn't care really. But it was kind of, if you're brought up in that culture, where you're not allowed to talk about being a bit vulnerable, that's really hard. So when things are happening, like when you're really busy at work, you're not encouraged to say, actually, I'm feeling a bit stressed by this.
I can understand where you come from. There's not many people who can say this, but I've had many different trades through my life. And 14 years down the mines, and 14 years down the mines, that workforce, if I could go back tomorrow, the workforce together, man to man, nowhere else I've experienced that. And they were, like you say, the alpha male.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And it's a different sort of breed.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
I do wonder as well if it's changing. Like there's those, I suppose, cultural norms that were there, and then if you look at things like social media and stuff like that, I kind of think that almost puts people in, because people get windows into different. You know, it's a lot more about bodies. They're a lot more about. Everyone's just gives a snippet of their best ever day. Not, you know, people don't go generally on social media and today was a bit boring, or, you know, I didn't really do very much interesting. You only put the interesting bits, and I think that's almost becoming a new norm. So I think you're right that there was that whole culture around the mines and that maybe that sort of male culture there. And I think we've got a new one coming, and I'm not sure it's any more healthy, because I think it's always that stereotypical view of a perfect day, or something's exciting, or I'm posting this because I've been to the gym, or I've got a six pack or something like that. And most of us don't have that, and it's a bit unobtainable, which I think is equally damaging.
It takes me down to the memory lane, actually, where my father in the house, in the Asian culture, is completely different. Actually, it always, like, men goes to work, women actually sit at home, actually cooking and all those things. Then it slowly changed to where women went to work. Still, they did all those household work, but then still they worked, actually, because of the cost of living and everything. And my father never used to take his plate after eating from the dining table to the kitchen to wash it, right? So that's how actually I was brought up. When I saw, so men in the house actually eat, serve the food on the plate, and it was more in Asian culture. I couldn't say Asian Indian, because I've never seen the other parts of Asia. When I came here, actually, there are quite a few things which I learned from the culture here, where it is 50-50 in the house. I don't know, because I was never grown up here. I came at the age of 26. So wherever I started working, actually, they all talked about 50-50, women give equal rights and everything, which I thought actually it's really good, because my wife is working, she works long days, long nights. At the same time, when she comes home, actually, she's tired than me, because I work Monday to Friday, 8 to 4, 9 to 5, where she starts a shift at 7 o'clock and finishes around 9 as a nurse. So it means that actually I should have that shared responsibility. Sometimes that male domination thing comes out, and but because my kids are growing, and I don't want them to learn the bad habits from me, because they should treat their husbands well, and the husband should treat their wives well. So I have calmed down a lot, actually, and I'm taking all the bad bits out of my father and just being a new... It's not his fault. That's how actually he's been actually trained by his parents. And he now, after my mother's demise, he's so independent. We never thought actually he's going to survive in this world. That's how actually I have seen him. But after my mother died, and he's become a complete independent person now. He does all his work. He washes his own clothes. He hasn't got any. He's a retired person. He's got so much pension coming in, but still he hasn't got any servant or anything. He does his own work now, and he's really, for 72 touchwood, he's really hale and healthy, fit. He walks 5 kilometers a day, which actually it's a blessing in disguise. My mother gone, and he has become a different person. Yeah. So. It's good actually.
But honestly, don't make an assumption that the culture was any different here, because my dad came home and he would have expected his tea on the table.
I think it's dead right. Same with my
After the war, actually, does it changed a bit, or when women started going to work?
70s, 80s, I guess it started to shift. I think.
Right.
And,
So say when you were talking, I was just thinking of my gran and granddad, and it's the same thing of love my granddad to pieces, but we have the same assumption of when my gran, if she goes first, I don't know how he's going to adjust, because he is that sort of.
But I do see a difference now, though. So I've got 2 sons who are in their late 20s now, but I've got nephews and who are in their teens. The way they talk to each other and the way they are with each other is very different to how I was brought up.
Right.
So they're very physical with each other. They'll kind of reassure each other. They'll touch each other. They'll hug each other when they meet. That would never have happened when I was a kid. You only touched somebody to hit them or to push them over a bit. So, that for me, I think is a really healthy change.
Yeah.
So, you've got all the social media stuff, you're right. That puts pressure on people to be perfect, doesn't it? But when I see them talking to each other, and I think they're much more respectful to women. Not all young people are, but I think it's just that would never have happened when I was growing up.
That's true.
I think although social media definitely presents those extra pressures, the way media and we've got TVs and stuff now, we can broadcast things a lot better, so people's opinions and what's going on, and that is there for us to kind of form opinions, so it's maybe easier to share although they're not always put on social media. When they are, it's easier to kind of spread that as well. So things like Movember and raising awareness is all kind of social media based. So
Absolutely, and like again, International Men's Day, like the reason we're here today is about recognising the older patterns of not talking and trying to change that, I guess. And the next question I would ask you, and it is a bit of a hard one, I guess, in terms of what do you each do in your day-to-day lives that maybe perhaps breaks that pattern, changes it. Like, I know you're saying, with your kids, you're making sure you don't repeat the same sort of pattern.
Correct. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And is there times where you catch yourself and you go, oh, I shouldn't do that and I need to...
Yeah, actually I do. It's my own reflection, actually. I shouldn't have done that. And actually, I do apologize. I put my hands up and say, even my son who is 10 years old, I do. Because sometimes actually when stress at work, my work ethic is actually between 8 and 4 and 9 to 5. I don't show it to my work colleagues, right? What happens is I always tell my colleagues as well, actually, try and go to the car park and shout. If not, what will happen is the moment you see your kids, you'll show that to them because you show that frustration because they're so vulnerable. And even if they come and ask you something, you'll be shouting at them because all the frustrations what you had at the stress. To be honest, actually, I've never heard the word called andropause. Right? Yeah, because a few years ago, actually, when we have got this andropausal group and menopausal group, I never thought actually there is something for men actually like women, which probably, I don't know at what age actually we will hit that. Probably because you do go to that group or you chair the group or...
Well, no, I'm part of that group. I go to that group because I went to that group partly because when my mum went through the menopause, I was afraid for my life sometimes. She didn't want to jam my head between the taps because I said I didn't want sausage and mash for lunch. So I kind of saw it in action and kind of like, I didn't understand it then. But since, I've got a bit older and I talked to my sisters and my sisters have gone through menopause, I understand the difference it makes to people's confidence levels. It's not just about hot flushes. It's not just about losing your temper. It really has got a big effect. So it's made me be a bit more responsive to that and then realise actually, this whole thing about a midlife crisis. Now I've retired now. I retired and returned. So I retired because I thought actually I having seen my dad work and work and work and work, and that was all that he was on the docks. He was kind of like, he was never away from the docks, and when he was away from the docks, he wasn't like a proper dad that you could have a conversation with. You know, you wouldn't have had that kind of interaction with my dad. He'd have thought you were a bit odd to be talking about. But with my sons and with my nephews, and that, I always tell them I love them. Whenever I see them, I kind of hug them every time I see them. And I started that thing in my family about people being physical with each other, because that breaks down a lot of those barriers. It's really reassuring, isn't it, to be told. My dad used to love being hugged. Absolutely loved it. You would never have done it when you were a kid growing up.
Yeah, in Tamil actually there is a word called a kattipudi vaidyam, which means that is hugging each other, which is actually a medicine to half of the problems. It's just actually like laughter therapy and all those things actually. So it's one of those ones, hugging actually, which it's olden days it wasn't common. In India actually we do is actually we fall on the elders' feet. When I first, if I see any of my uncles and aunt, the first thing what we do is we just go and get their blessings. Actually, that's a common practice. But even if any of my friends' parents comes who are Indians, actually we do that because one, we do it. Second thing, they would expect as well, because it's a cultural thing. Those are the things which brings happiness to them as well. Actually, this guy actually still hasn't forgotten his culture. After come into this country for 20 odd years, and it won't go. But my son won't do it.
Right.
No, because he's never been practiced to that. He has never seen that. He sees once in a blue moon when I do it actually in front of the elders. So, and also I don't force.
No,
You need to fall on my feet. It is not. It is something which was. So, and in the house actually we don't force things. Actually, you need to go to the temple every Sunday and all those things. So, which I've given good freedom, and they're enjoying their life actually. So. Stress-wise, or we keep it ourselves actually, so just need to let it out actually. So
we bottle it up too much. But I've done that myself. I bottled it up too much and then just taking it out on the family.
Comes out in different ways as well. Sometimes you have to catch yourself and go, oh, actually, was I a bit
I think I bottled it up so much one time. I actually put my arm around my brother because I was so like I literally put it around his neck because I was so fed up. But once I realised I'd done it, I basically went outside and I basically did not want to come back inside.
But it is that thing of, like you said, you were told to be physical in the sense of violent, I guess.
Exactly.
You know, it is one of those things where you've got to kind of catch yourself doing it and kind of be conscious to unlearn it. And I guess with that leads us on, I guess, in terms of, is that different stresses that you bring home from work, because I kind of want to touch on you know, careers, and you know, men again traditionally were always seen as the breadwinners and you had to be constantly moving on to the next thing, and we've all mentioned here we've been in you know, with the trust in different, you know, 7-8 years kind of thing. So do you take your job home with you, or are you getting pretty good at
I'm getting pretty good at trying to keep work away from home, but it's as you say, it's a balancing act.
Also depends on what your stresses are. If you've got things at home, that I mean, we're talking about our lives, not just our work lives. And if you've got somebody who's ill, or your stresses in your family or other bits, that's going to have a bigger effect than work. And at other times, work might be. So we're all balancing, you know, life outside work and life inside work, and the stresses. It's not all work-related stress. Sometimes, you know, mum dying, stuff like that. That gives you a lot of stress, and that's acute pressure. And it's work that probably takes a back, you know, seat mentally compared with other bits. So I think we've got to look at our lives in totality rather than say it's all work or it's life outside work separate. Actually, it's a continuum. We're the same people throughout, and I think you've just got to try and manage both aspects of your life, you know, in different ways.
And coming to work sometimes it's a positive thing, isn't it? Because I used to care for my dad, who had dementia for the last 2 years of his life, so I kind of travel up and down to Teesside to kind of give my mum some respite, really, essentially, and I'd be there every weekend. But coming into work didn't feel like an extra pressure. It felt like a lot of my friends were here, and there was some really nice people I could talk to. It's a bit like you were saying, when you're in the mines or you're in a kind of conversation, like where you've got really close colleagues, that can like normalise your life and help you. It can be a coping mechanism. The running really helped as well, I've got to say, but that was a big help to me.
This illness, which people don't realise, and there's very few people I find to talk about it, can bring a lot of stress on. And you don't talk about it, and you can really have bad moments. You know, it's left with something which 3 years ago, I would say for a 61-year-old man, I was pretty healthy. Now, at 64, it's changed my life
Yeah, absolutely.
from everything.
I was going to ask, because again, you mentioned at the beginning there, you've mentioned as well you've had different careers, and this has probably been a bit of a, not a stop, but it's been a knock to it, and it's...
Well, for career-wise and for a man, I think I've done a lot of different work jobs all over the world and that. But when you come to a stage in your life where an illness which wasn't around and how it affects you now,
Yeah, absolutely.
I probably would say big time.
Yeah.
Couldn't do the running.
Yeah.
The first thing I got from it was walking, which I never did, but that was to help improve on the health side.
Yeah.
So I learned something from the walking, which is a good thing, but you still have different days. Yeah, I should say each day is different.
Yeah, exactly. Very true.
And being a man, to cope with that is very hard.
Because there is that thing...
And this is the first time I've ever said this,
Yeah.
Well done.
It's really, really, even in the workplace.
It's not something everybody talks about, and it's that bit
I
hard.
would say
you
very
break,
few
you break your
people-
leg, and it's in a plaster. People will talk
Because
about that.
before I came in here, I just looked
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
maintenance. But underneath that,
Absolutely.
there's something big time.
Patrick, to go back to your point, actually, you hit the nail on the head there. Actually, coming to work relieves some of the stress, actually, the personal stress. Because I always said to my staff, who says that anxiety and stress, sitting in the house is never going to actually help you, because 8 hours sitting in the house, you're staring at the wall, watching the TV is never going to. But once you come into the office, you're going to see many faces there, which will completely take you out of that stress. For me, the first family is the work, because we are here for 8 hours, right? Evening you go home, 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, until 9 o'clock, you're going to see your family only for 4 hours. After that, you are technically dead, unless if you are, when you woke up next day, or else actually, if you die in the sleep, you're not going to see them next day. So basically, you're spending your time with your family 4 hours, but 8 hours with your work colleagues actually actively. So if you think about it, this is the first family for me, and that 4 hours I spend time with my family, quality, and then we go to bed. Next morning, we wake up, pray to God, say, yes, we are fine, go back to the work family again. So that relieves me stress coming to work, actually, because I've got loads of challenges to face, which I forget about my mother's demise in India. How is my father? But the moment when I travel back actually home at 5 o'clock, I'll ring my father, is everything okay with you? Yes, he says, yeah, everything is okay. Then that's the next step. So that's how I process my stress, actually. So...
I was just going to say, I think one of the most stressful things I've ever done was bought my first house. Like, going through the legal process and everything, and if I hadn't had my friends at work, like, I don't know how I would have coped with that. Like, we're quite a close-knit team, so being able to come in and say, oh, the lawyer's done this, or I've not heard from this person, was a really good stress relief mechanism. So.
And I guess, Gordon, for you, with long COVID, I imagine you might have been off for a while.
17 months.
So again, it's that, I guess, you didn't have that, and then readjusting to having that.
People don't understand 17 months in a house.
Yeah, exactly.
It's what Steve was saying. It's staring at the the walls, and
there was one record, and it just, because I like my music, and that one record just hits it all the time like a goldfish in a bowl. And I suppose again, man doesn't want to talk about these sort of things.
Exactly.
So World Man's Day or International Day for Men, there's a lot of men out there, probably a lot worse.
Exactly, that's right.
And we're sitting around this table now, there's people a lot worse and still never talk about it.
I know.
Exactly.
like I say, this is why we're kind of here today to try, because hopefully the takeaway from this is people can talk, and hopefully they will talk, and it's like it is important. I guess the thing I also want to ask, and this is purely from I started the trust around the same sort of time that International Women's Day was on as well, and one question that was always asked, and I thought it stuck with me, and I thought I'm going to ask that if we do anything for International Men's Day as well, is how do you juggle having your family, children, things like that, with working? Because that's always a question that I think is put to women. Because again, going back to what we've mentioned in back a while, was women stayed at home, but now they do all the home stuff as well as go to work. So how do you juggle that?
I think it's the same as women. I think going back to Stish's point about 50-50, I'd like to think I get pretty involved with the kids. There's a lot of stuff that I do that my dad never would have done with me. And it's not just being the dad's taxi. There's a lot of other bits where I think you're much more involved with their lives. I think it's much more about co-parenting from my perspective. And I juggle things, so I would often come home, spend the time with, when they were young, you'd spend the time getting them to sleep and things, and then I would start work again at 9 o'clock at night. But that meant that I was there at that time when they needed me, and I'd do that. So I think partly we've got some flexibility now that maybe we didn't have there. I think kids are probably a bigger flexible priority in our lives in the way that I think it was a very, my parents' generation, it was very much the mother's role, whereas now I think it is much more of a mutual role. And I think you have to also play as a team. I think you need to, it's not just about what you do, it's about how do you work with your partner to make sure you cover those bases, because otherwise if you take it all on yourself, this has got to be about how you share and communicate those things. So I think it's about all of those different steps, and you losing the flexibility in your own life to in that way.
I mean, I think it's really interesting when you're talking about kids and about parenting and all the rest of it. I mean, I had a very different experience from that because I didn't raise my kids. I'm a gay man, and I had 2 children with a lesbian couple, so they actually raised the kids, but I had a really good relationship with them, and I've got a brilliant mum with them now. But even when we put legislation in place, it allows men to have 50-50 kind of maternity, paternity leave. Very, very small percentage of men actually take it up. So I think there's still something in the system that says to men parenting is the main responsibility of women. And that must be massively frustrating for women where that opportunity is there for somebody. I think men invest a lot in the status of their work.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Work's really important for men, isn't it? So when you were off for a long time, that must have been really difficult to manage. If you've kind of worked all of your life, that's a kind of hard thing for men to kind of come to terms with, I think. I think that's the same now for women, because women are invested in the work, so why we haven't changed as much, I don't think, as things have changed for women, I think.
So from my personal experience, I moved to this country. Actually, I need to quote this. I don't know whether you've known a writer called Robert Frost, who wrote a poem called The Road Not Taken or something, actually, where you come to a junction, it's 2 roads split. One is actually looks flowery and the other one is with thorns and stuff. So basically, me and my wife were in that junction, and actually we could have stayed in India or probably in Singapore, or whether to take another route, and we don't know how that route is going to be. But that was actually where in 2004 we were in that junction, and we took this route here. No extended family, no friends, nobody. Northumbria went to Singapore to recruit nurses, and she came first and I joined her. So we had a daughter actually who lived with my parents at that time, 2 years actually. We brought her in 2004. It was so hard actually at that time because I was working in a call center. She was working here in as a nurse here. So we sat down, we planned actually how we are going to do it. And the job came up in medical records here, and I applied for it. And I got the job. So I was doing 8 to 4 and she was permanent night shift. So it was, but permanent night shift long. So she works 3 nights, 4 days off, and next week it's 4 nights and 3 days off. So we did put her actually the kids first, and we never expected actually anybody to look after, because it was us who took that route. We have to manage that, or else if we would have stayed in the other route, my parents would have looked after my daughter. But we didn't want that, because we wanted to be independent, and we make sure that actually we would be able to survive this life actually. So at that time actually that's where actually we decided it has to be 50-50. Well, I cannot expect my wife to finish night shift and come back, because she's patient focused. Whatever actually, if she doesn't get good sleep, we're putting actually the patients at risk actually if she doesn't go to sleep, medication error or anything. So we decided, irrespective of whatever the money is, we'll compromise on the other aspects. We'll put her in kids first. She gets good sleep. I go drop her, pick her up in the evening. By the time when we all have the tea at 7 o'clock, I put her in bed and she went for night shift. So we balanced ours, and initially we compromised loads of going out to friends' houses or finding friends and all those things. We didn't want that at that time. We wanted my daughter to grow first. Then we'll enjoy actually, because it's a long way. Life is so. We thought actually that's how actually we managed our stress. And a couple of times my mother-in-law came here, which helped us as well. But still, we didn't leave my daughter with my mother-in-law. We still put her in kids first because I don't want my mother-in-law to come and actually look after. She's here to actually as a moral support, not as a babysitter. So that's so we had some clear plan, and it was futuristic.
And I guess, again, I don't know if anyone on the table doesn't have children, but if there are people that don't have, do you feel pressured to in any kind of way? I guess it's, again, different for you.
Yeah, for different.
Because you've all already had it. Do we all have... I mean, I don't feel any pressure. Yeah. Because I told my family, I was like, all my older siblings will have them. Yeah. For my mum, my dad to become grandparents, so the pressure was off me. Yeah. But I guess with that, do you feel the pressure to, again, make sure that, you know, they know that they don't have to be anything in particular, that they can be themselves or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, you even get that with your own kids, don't you, even if you do have kids. So kind of, I know... And both of my kids were very, very bright, and they went to Cambridge and Oxford, and the one that went to Cambridge was really struggling there with his mental health. He felt like a fish out of water. He didn't feel like he knew. He went to he did physics, which is like very masculine and very blokey, and a lot of the students who are just focused on work, but actually wanted to go and have a social life. His mums were really pushing him to stay and stick at it, but when he had a conversation with me, the first thing I said to him is, are you really happy there? Is it making you happy? Is it making you and it was making him really unhappy. It's interesting that you could have those conversations with me, with another man, but you could never have them with his mums, because it created an expectation that, you know, you've got to Cambridge, you've got to stay, it's good for your future, and actually he's gone to Taiwan. It
wasn't a bad expectation from the mother. Mother wants the son to settle down. Actually, so that's the whole idea.
Recognise a really good thing. Exactly, you've achieved this thing, and kind of like, but, you know, stick at it. But actually, you would have been really miserable. And that's the whole thing about status for men. Yeah. You know, if you achieve something, then you've got to stick at it. And actually, you can come and say you're miserable and you're not happy, and you can do something about it.
Honestly speaking, if my wife allows, I'll be happily be in a house husband. But with the current cost of living and inflation, I don't think so. It is easy that one person can actually stay at home because of all the outgoing commitments what you have got. So
well, again, I suppose that bleeds into it, because again, with the pressures on men being still maybe seen as the primary, you know, breadwinners and stuff, with the cost of living, I guess it will be a pressurised circumstance, which again bleeds into the whole mental health conversation. So hopefully, this table can make that bit of a difference and get through the message that it is all right to have conversations. Because if, you know, I guess the takeaway is, if you're struggling as an individual, the chances are others are. Yes. You know, they've got their own worries, and it might actually be similar to what, you know, you're feeling also. So
it'd be interesting whether people would admit to, you know, if you're on a really bad day and you're feeling like crap, would you come in and tell? Who would you tell?
Exactly.
Who would you tell?
But I think the other thing, and we probably haven't touched on it, is the kind of physical health, which is, you know, there's a mixture between the anguish, I think, of the long COVID and the physical health. But men die much earlier than women, and it's not just, you're right about suicide, it's not just mental health. They don't go when they've got physical aches, they've got problems, they don't go and seek help at an early age. And I think it's important that we absolutely have a real focus on mental health, but don't ignore the physical side of things, because men ignore that physical side all the time, and that's one of the reasons that men die years earlier than women. And I think we've always got to bear that side of it in mind as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah.